The most powerful Sith Lord in galactic history carried a weapon he absolutely despised. And when the Jedi finally saw it, they realized he'd been mocking them the entire time. This is the twisted story of Palpatine's lightsaber, and why even Darth Vader couldn't stand it. What's up, Star Wars fans? So here's something that always bugged me about Revenge of the Sith. When Palpatine finally reveals himself and ignites that lightsaber against Mace Windu, it's this gorgeous, ornate weapon covered in gold detailing. But then you find out the truth behind it, and man, it gets dark. Real dark. Because that lightsaber, it was never meant to be a weapon. It was an insult wrapped in electrum and frick, designed specifically to humiliate the Jedi Order. First off, we gotta understand something fundamental about Palpatine. This guy genuinely believed that lightsabers were beneath him. According to the novels, especially Darth Plagueis and Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, Sidious felt that he and the Sith had outgrown the need for lightsabers. To him, the weapon represented a crutch that the Jedi relied on way too heavily. Think about it. In Return of the Jedi, when Luke's lightsaber rolls to his feet, what does Palpatine do? He dismisses it with pure contempt, calling it a Jedi weapon, like it's some kind of relic from a forgotten age. And you know what? He's right about one thing. The Jedi did put way too much stock in their lightsabers. Palpatine's philosophy was simple. Why limit yourself to a glowing stick when you have the entire dark side of the Force at your fingertips? He could manipulate senators, orchestrate wars, and fry his enemies with Force lightning. A lightsaber? That was just limited. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite hating lightsabers, Palpatine still crafted one during his training under Darth Plagueis. And he didn't just make any lightsaber. He made the most expensive, most exquisite lightsaber anyone had ever seen. So let's talk about what made Palpatine's lightsaber so offensive to the Jedi Order. This thing was constructed from electrum, a rare, incredibly expensive gold-colored alloy, and frick, which is basically one of the most indestructible materials in the galaxy. The hilt had intricate designs, detailed craftsmanship, and just screamed wealth and power. It was a work of art, and that was exactly the point. See, Palpatine built this lightsaber to show off, to flaunt, to quietly tell the Jedi, "Look at me. I'm hiding right under your noses, carrying this outrageously expensive Sith weapon, and you can't even sense me in the Force." It was the ultimate flex. But it gets even better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. Palpatine only continued to carry his lightsaber for one reason: to mock the Jedi. He viewed it as little more than an affectation, an accessory to his grand deception. In his mind, he was proving a point every single day he walked through the Senate. "You Jedi think you're so powerful with your lightsabers, but I can use one better than you without even believing in it." And when the time finally came, when Mace Windu and those 3 other Jedi Masters burst into his office, Palpatine proved his point. He killed Agen Kolar and Saesee Tiin in seconds. Kit Fisto barely lasted longer, and these were Jedi Masters, the best of the best. Yet Palpatine, who literally thought lightsabers were outdated, dismantled them with ease. That's gotta sting. Okay, now let's talk about Vader's perspective, because this is where things get really complicated. Darth Vader hated Palpatine's lightsaber for completely different reasons than the Jedi did, and it all comes down to what that weapon represented. According to the Star Wars comics, specifically the Darth Vader Dark Lord of the Sith series by Charles Soule, Palpatine actually challenged Vader to a duel shortly after Revenge of the Sith. And you know what Palpatine did? He beat Vader, decisively. Then he stood over his burned, broken apprentice and mocked him for fighting like a Jedi. Palpatine's whole point was that Vader was too dependent on his lightsaber. He wasn't using the Force properly. He wasn't embracing the full power of the dark side. He was still clinging to his Jedi training, and in Palpatine's mind, that made him weak. So every time Vader saw Palpatine's ornate, perfectly crafted lightsaber, it was a reminder. A reminder that his master viewed lightsabers as tools for weaklings. A reminder that Vader himself was being criticized for using the very weapon that defined his existence. But here's the kicker. Vader built his own lightsaber in a way that deliberately diverged from Palpatine's design. When he constructed his iconic red blade, he made it bigger, bulkier, more functional. It resembled his old lightsaber from when he was Anakin Skywalker, and according to the comics, Palpatine noticed this. He saw that Vader viewed his lightsaber, this masterwork of Sith craftsmanship, as nothing more than an antique. Can you imagine the tension in that moment? Vader's basically telling his master, "Your fancy weapon is outdated. Mine is built for actual combat." And that resentment? It went both ways. Palpatine hated that Vader was so attached to his lightsaber. He hated that Vader couldn't let go of his past as Anakin. And Vader hated that Palpatine constantly belittled him for it, treating him like a disappointing student who just couldn't grasp the lesson. But let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture here, because this whole situation reveals something crucial about the Sith philosophy. Palpatine genuinely believed that the Jedi had become blind to the true nature of the Force. They'd turned the lightsaber into a sacred symbol, their defining weapon, and in doing so, they'd limited themselves. They couldn't see that everything around them, the very air, the buildings, their opponents, could be a weapon through the Force. And you know what? He kind of had a point. Look at how Palpatine fights in the movies. Against Yoda in Revenge of the Sith, what does he do after losing his lightsaber? He starts hurling Senate pods, massive chunks of metal flying through the air like missiles. That's someone who understands the Force as a limitless power source, not something confined to a blade. In Return of the Jedi, he doesn't even bother with a lightsaber. He just uses Force lightning to torture Luke, reveling in his absolute power over the situation. To Palpatine, that was the ultimate weapon: fear, pain, manipulation, and raw dark side energy. But here's where Palpatine's arrogance becomes his downfall. Because while he's busy mocking the Jedi for their dependence on lightsabers, while he's humiliating Vader for fighting like a Jedi, he's missing the actual point. The lightsaber isn't just a weapon, it's a symbol of commitment, of discipline, of connection to something greater than yourself. And in the end, it's Vader's connection to his past, his memories of being Anakin, his love for his son, that brings Palpatine down. Not Force lightning, not manipulation, just a father choosing to save his child. And here's the ultimate irony in all of this. Palpatine built the most perfect lightsaber in the galaxy just to prove he didn't need it. He crafted this weapon of exquisite beauty and incredible power, carried it through the halls of the Senate for years, and used it to cut down some of the greatest Jedi Masters ever to live. And then, he abandoned it, lost it down the streets of Coruscant during his fight with Mace Windu, used a backup against Yoda, and never picked one up again. By the time of the original trilogy, Palpatine has completely moved beyond lightsabers. He's achieved his vision of Sith power, pure mastery of the dark side without any physical weapons. And when he returns in The Rise of Skywalker on Exegol, you notice something? No lightsaber. He doesn't even consider reclaiming one, because in the end, he proved his point. He beat the Jedi. He conquered the galaxy. He did it all with manipulation, Force lightning, and political cunning. The lightsaber was just a prop in his grand performance. So yeah, everyone hated Palpatine's lightsaber, but for completely different reasons. The Jedi hated it because it represented their failure. They couldn't sense him, couldn't stop him. Vader hated it because it symbolized his master's contempt for the weapon that defined him. And Palpatine? He hated it too, because to him, it represented the Jedi's greatest weakness. But what do you think? Was Palpatine right that the Jedi relied too much on their lightsabers? Or was he just a bitter old Sith Lord who couldn't appreciate a good plasma blade? Let me know in the comments below. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching. May the Force be with you, always.